Hi guys, welcome to Purple Angles. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Natalie.
Where we bring back healthy conversations
and the beauty of divergent opinions.
Today we're speaking about men, sex, and testosterone.
Interesting.
So we'll start with, what is testosterone? So it's a hormone. It is produced in the testicles of men. It is vital for the development of male reproductive tissues, so testes and prostate. But testosterone has an effect on so many other areas within the body than just the testes and prostate. So it acts on muscles, bone mass, body hair growth, deepening the voice, sex drive, sperm production, bone health, heart health, brain health. So it's really everywhere. So it is something that is important. It is something that touches every man, and it also touches women, but we're focusing on men today. It is a hormone that goes down with age. So we do see a trend that older men have less and less testosterone. And there are different symptoms that are associated with high levels of testosterone and low levels of testosterone. So I'll speak about the low levels of testosterone. It is associated with lower sex drives, erectile dysfunction, fatigue, depression, loss of body hair, obesity, weight gain or weight resistance, or you're unable to lose weight. Also a reduced muscle mass. It is associated with cardiovascular, so heart issues, strokes, osteoporosis, joint pain, gynecomastia, so that's like the man boobs, is all a reflection of a lower level of testosterone. So it's pretty serious. We see that it doesn't only affect the penis, it affects so many other places within the body. Now, on the other side, higher levels of testosterone is not necessarily better. So high levels, so too high, we have a balance. Now where too high levels of testosterone has been associated with an increased level of bad cholesterol, heart issues, stroke as well. So we see that too low or too high, not good. Sleep apnea, infertility, low sperm count, reduced prostate size, mood swings, mania, bipolar, aggressiveness, increased body hair, skin issues, so acne, we'll see a lot more of that. We see this in women too when they have too high levels of testosterone, headaches, and high libido. So we see that there's low and high is not necessarily better. We're speaking about testosterone, but I do want to bring something before I let you speak about what we've been seeing in the world regarding these hormones. So we do speak a lot about testosterone and the associated with the manhood and that it's super important. And as we just saw, too high levels of testosterone is not better. But also we shouldn't have this idea or this conception that estrogen is bad for men. So estrogen is actually important for men. Sex drive, erection, sperm production. We're not going to dive into this, but I just want to bring this in general, that estrogen levels are also a way to balance the hormone, and they are important for the functionality of the body. I'd love for you to tell us a bit more about the trends that we've been seeing in testosterone level or related to men in general in society nowadays.
Yes, so there's been a lot of trends related to how testosterone levels, a lot of studies that looked on the testosterone levels of men in the last decades. And it actually started with a study that was done in the 80s, and that show actually published in the 2000s, but started in the 80s. That shows that we've seen a decrease of the testosterone levels in men by 1% every year. Wow. So if you think of it of like cumulative effect, and that applies not only for men, because of like the decline is not related just because men are getting older. We're talking comparing men at the same age at different, in different decades. And we're seeing that the person, like the man that's in the, year 2014, 15, 16, has a significant lower level of testosterone than a man in the 1980s, for example. So, and that was not related to the age. So that's something to remember. There's another study that looked at the impact, like the level of testosterone in young men and in adult men. So when we're talking young men, we're talking 15 to 39 years old. And when we're talking like adult men, we're talking over 39 years old. So we saw that the decline was also significant in those men. And the study was done between 1999 to 2016. And what we saw is that for the average, 40-year-old man and higher, we saw that the levels of testosterone were actually lower than normal in 10 to 40% of these men. And in the young adult men, we saw that it was actually around 20%. So that is very significant. That's very important when I think 1 out of 5 young men, like less than 40 years old, have a deficiency in testosterone. Like their levels of testosterone are lower than the normal. And that has not been the case in the past with our ancestors, our parents, our grandparents. So that is something that can be very alarming. And I think it requires, we need to look a little bit deeper into that and see how can that have an impact on our men and in the men in our lives. So this is what we're doing today. We're gonna dig a little bit deeper when it comes to like what the impact of that can be. One thing that I do want to point out in those studies that looked at that is that they try to see what are the causes of that. Is it related? Sometimes they link it to smoking. Sometimes they link it to a higher BMI, which is a body mass index. And in some studies, they have seen a direct link. So the higher the BMI, the lower the testosterone levels were. So that's something that has been shown in studies. And to take into account when, let's say, we do want to balance back that kind of, hormonal levels. And I would love for you to speak a little bit about what are the different ways we can balance those hormones.
Yeah, sure. So you did speak about obese or higher BMI levels, and the fat tissues are productors, sorry, of estrogen hormones. So the higher fat tissue you have, the higher estrogen levels you will have. So again, estrogen is not a bad hormone. Our goal is not to think, oh, we have to completely eliminate estrogen. But if you have a high loads of estrogen coming in from different sources, then yes, it will lead to an imbalance of your testosterone estrogen levels. So high fat tissues is something that is associated with lower testosterone levels, so trying to reduce that. However, too much calorie restriction has also led to lower levels of testosterone. So what you want is not necessarily fast and not eat protein or not eat food. You don't want to be restrictive, because then you're not bringing the nutrients necessary to create your testosterone, to create other nutrients within your genitals and the man areas and testes, but you do want to reduce your fat level and increase more of the muscle. So that is something to think about. Other studies have shown very basic things to really rebalance. So we do know stress has an impact, and everything that will lead to a reduction of stress will rebalance or help rebalance testosterone levels. So higher level of cortisol or higher level of prolactin do shut down a bit of the testosterone. So spending time outside versus being in a synthetic world and in synthetic environment. So spending time outside, sun, we do see the link with vitamin D, but I don't believe sun is only vitamin D source. As we know, sun brings so much more than just vitamin D. So spending time outside, sleeping. So sleeping does create an increase of GH, which is your growth hormone, and that will induce a higher level of testosterone. So when you sleep well, then you will have it helps rebalance not only testosterone but a bunch of different hormones. Meditation, prayer, and all of these other things also help reduce stress. So we kind of see the link where you're like, okay, so if it reduces stress, then could possibly help rebalance testosterone levels. So those are things that men can do. Other things, actually having a purpose or having something to work towards balances. Yeah, it has an impact on the balancing of hormones and feeling less stressed. Also, again, we're linking to this. I'm sure there's more than just the cortisol level for that, but purpose does help rebalance also. Not too much exercise. So as I said a bit before, if you like exercise for long hours vigorously, and what was defined as vigorous in different studies was like 4 times a week. So 4 times a week of an hour max of vigorous exercise is considered okay. But once you start exceeding that, and again, this is very person dependent. Those were the people within different studies. But if you're feeling that over exercising or doing like heavy weights too much, too often, it could increase your prolactin levels, which is a hormone that comes and shuts down a bit of your testosterone. So then you're imbalanced. What could help rebalance that is moving, but you could walk. So do things that are not necessarily as image of men. So not necessarily the whole body work, like body lifting and not body lift, weightlifting and all that. So just rebalancing the activities that you do to see how you feel based on that. Other things, so there's something called xenoestrogen. So it's molecules that go and stimulate estrogen receptors. So men and women have estrogen receptors. So xenoestrogen, is like molecules that will act like estrogen. So again, as I said, estrogen is not bad, but you don't want extra too much of estrogen, because then you're shutting down your testosterone. And molecules that do have these xenoestrogen activity are, I'll give you an example because there's a few, but we do have alcohol. Alcohol does several things within the body. So it will act on a GABA receptor, and that will also lead to a reduction of testosterone, but it also has an increase of aromatase. I'm going in details. I don't want to lose you guys, but all this to say that alcohol, ideally, if you can, would be to eliminate it if you want to have healthy levels of testosterone, or limit to 2 per week, which is what is being seen, to consumption. So not a huge glass of wine, but 2 regular consumption per week would help rebalance your testosterone levels. Smoking cannabis was associated with lower levels of testosterone. So it's something that you consume, maybe try to reduce that. Plastic, BPA, so it's mostly bisphenol A, which is also a xenoestrogen. So it will go and activate some estrogen receptors within the body. This is found mostly in plastic bottles. And often you're going to see some plastic bottles with no BPA written. It's not necessarily better. There's different studies that found that even when it's written that there are other molecules within the plastic that do act as a xenoestrogen and stimulate the estrogen receptors. Ideally, if you can, unless you're super thirsty, we're not going to go there, but eliminate everything that is plastic bottle for the consumption. I'll say a couple of other ones. I think we're still good on time. Heavy metals, so aluminum, arsenic, cadmium, lead, mercury, they all activate estrogen receptors, amongst other things. Like they do 100 million things that we don't necessarily like. And pesticides and herbicides. So it's basics, right? It's the foods that we consume. It's like the quality of what you consume. It looks minor. It looks like, oh, it won't have an impact, but we're seeing different studies, because once you do the sum of all of those, you don't spend time outside, you eat food that is full of pesticides, you drink from plastic bottles, you don't exercise or you're over exercise, like all of those accumulate, which lead to an imbalance in your hormones. Sometimes you're going to need to change one thing. Sometimes it's a more drastic lifestyle change that you will have to do. And why we're speaking about different things and actions that you can take is because we do see the impact on humans. So I'd love for you to share, what is the actual impact that we're seeing, and how is that affecting our men on a day-to-day and on different levels?
Thank you for sharing all the different ways to kind of bring your levels of, testosterone back to normal, because we're talking about that trend that's been happening in the last decades of men having less levels of testosterone and being more deficient and needing kind of that boost to, to feel better in their own bodies. So there are a lot of physical aspects to having low testosterone. As you've said before, it's going to have an impact on the heart, it's going to have an impact on your bone structure, it's going to have a lot of different physical impacts. But I think there's one that we need to speak about, is the mental health impact. So we have seen that lower levels of testosterone have been linked with higher depression, with higher anxiety, with more irritability as well. It has been linked to more suicidal rates. The link has not been like, we can't say for sure that low level testosterone means directly higher suicidal rates, but there has been links between the two. And as we know, I mean, in our society today, unfortunately, 80% of suicide rates are done by men, are happening to men. So that's something we definitely want to be bringing down. And not saying that necessarily low levels of testosterone are responsible for that, but it is something to think about. So you sharing those tricks or those, tools or type of food to eat or what type of, like things to avoid are extremely helpful, because it is hard to understand what the cause of all this is, right? So we're saying, oh, there's this trend, but what is causing this? Is it exposure to all these things? Is it the fact that people are, have higher body mass index, suffer more of obesity, are more sedentary, they're not going outside, they're smoking more, they're smoking weed more? So there's a lot of different factors that could explain the cause. Unfortunately, it's hard to pinpoint one, but I think it's good to acknowledge that there is a change that's happened in the last decades. That's not something we want to bring in the next few decades with us, or give that, to our boys. So what can we do on a daily basis to kind of avoid that? And I think one subject we haven't spoken about related to low testosterone, or could potentially be related to low testosterone, and I think that's what people might think initially of when they think of low testosterone, is infertility. And what have you seen when it comes to the link between the two?
So it was actually, I was surprised when I first read it, because like high levels of testosterone could be associated with infertility too. So it brought back again the concept of balance, and that the predictor of infertility is not necessarily testosterone, but it could be many different things. And I did read some studies too, where they said that low testosterone were present in approximately like a 15% of infertile men. So we do see, is testosterone the only link? I don't think so. I think the health, the structure, the sperm count, all of that has several factors that come into play. Testosterone could be one, and it could be, but it doesn't seem like the official only predictor of. However, we see that it does have other impacts within health. So could that have an impact on other things that we haven't seen yet in studies? It could be. I mean, there's no exact link, but we do see some possible correlations.
Mm-hmm. And I'm happy we're speaking about infertility, and that's something I think that was important to share today, because there has been a lot of couples are struggling with infertility more and more and more than ever before. So taking the time to kind of look at what the causes could be is important. So now we're speaking about a potential link between low levels of testosterone with infertility, which can a little bit maybe explain, like, the low levels of testosterone going down year by year could explain why maybe we have more infertility. We can't make that conclusion, of course, but there's other different studies that looked into the sperm count and looked into the total sperm count of men, and how that has also changed in the last few decades. And unfortunately, we see the same pattern. There has been a decline in the sperm count and total sperm count in men in the last 50 years. So that is also something that will have a direct impact on infertility. So low testosterone is a little bit more, we can't necessarily do a direct link between the two of them. It is a potential factor, but sperm count does have an impact on infertility. And knowing that the levels of sperm count and total sperm count are going down also year by year by year is something that we need to think about and see how can we help that, or how can we change that? What are the things that can be done to kind of higher our chances of being more fertile and being more healthy within our masculine bodies? So what I've seen, and I'm going to share some stats with you. I was honestly shocked when I saw those numbers, and it's a little bit worrisome, but among men in all continents, we're not talking just North America, Australia, like we're talking all over the world, there was a decline by 51.6% of sperm count between 1973 and 2018. 51.6. And what they've seen is that the decline, I'm saying like 1973 to 2018, that's 50 years. But the decline was actually steeper after year 2000. So it was more I would say the decline was actually higher starting at the year 2000. when we look at the total sperm count, so there's different types of, ways of counting the sperms. When we look at total sperm count, we're talking a decline of 62.3% in the last 50 years.
Shocking.
When I saw that, I was like, okay, like this is something there's been a shift somewhere. Now, this can be, due to a lot of things, a lot of things. And I think we did point out a few things earlier that were related to, testosterone, but they also can be related to sperm count.
That's what I was going to say, because like the impact of sun could have more than just a testosterone level change. You could have benefits for you that could impact your, so there's links in many activities or changes that you could do.
Exactly. And I'm happy you shared that earlier, because I think these are like the first thing to start with. I mean, can we change our faith and can we change where we're at today? It's hard, but can we do things in our daily lives that can have an impact, a positive impact on the masculine health? I think the answer is 100% yes. So going back, to getting outside, being active, eating healthy, avoiding processed foods, drinking enough water, avoiding all chemicals, pesticides, all kind of, chemicals that are added to either our food or the products that we use, using more glass than plastic, not smoking, having a healthy body mass, so avoiding alcohol. So I'm going to repeat them because I want people to remember what these things are. Again, we're talking basics. So these are the things we all know are good to do. We just need to be reminded why they're important to do, because they have a huge direct impact, not only on your physical masculine health, but on the mental health of our men. And these are extremely important factors to remember.
Absolutely. Throughout our little research, we did bump into some very interesting and actually fun studies or studies. So I'm going to share what I found that is something that maybe people don't even think about. So what I found was that in the scrotum area, so every increase of temperature of 2 degrees Celsius temperature increase in the scrotum area is associated with a decrease of 20% in spermatogenesis and viability of sperm concentration, sperm count, morphology. So again, it brings back the fact that not only testosterone could affect sperm count and fertility, but there's so many other things. So the increase of temperature, 2 degrees, and it's known that this area, the scrotum area, is 2 to 8 degrees lower than the core body temperature. So there is a difference. And little things that could have an impact or that could change the sperm count and concentration: tight clothing, cycling. So someone that does a lot of cycling, like it's compacted and it's sitting on something that is that increases the temperature at this level. Sitting, driving for a lot, like if someone does that for work, sitting all the time, even sauna. So everything that is related to an increase of temperature in this area has been associated with these reduction of sperm count, morphology. And yeah, so I found this interesting, that fertility and all this related to the sperms could be impacted by physical, not only like biological or eating or food, but also different activities and
that we don't think of, right? Like, and
we don't think of.
Yeah, and you're talking about like the heat and the radiation, and when you're talking about heat, and I think sometimes we forget, but like when you're sitting down and you have your laptop on your lap, that's a source of heat also towards your genitals. So that's something to take into account. So yeah, constriction. So I'm happy we're sharing these things, as we don't think about that as being a potential factor. But one thing that I do want to bring out, and I think it was actually so funny because it's related to temperature and the genitals. So this started with like this, I don't know if some people have seen it, but there's a trend on TikTok, on Instagram, going on about sunbathing your genitals and like how it actually could be positive and for men to do that it brings their testosterone levels higher. I was intrigued when I saw that, and like you see pictures of men and sometimes women that are like just showing their legs like spread open under the sun, and you're like, okay, Is that actually real? Is that
What
true?
should you be doing?
How much time should you be doing it for? Is that something I want to try? Like, of course we see these things, but you have to be, relative, like you have to be critical about all this. So I looked into it. I was like, okay, where does that come from? Where is that study that speaks about that? And what I found about this, so very interesting, the study that actually looked into that is a 1939 study. So we're talking like over 80 years ago, that looked at the, actually not just the genitals, they looked at putting the chest of a man in contact with like UV radiation, so in contact with the sun every day for 5 days. And then they looked at the levels of testosterone in their urine. Okay. And what we saw is that after 5 days, there was an increase of 120% of their levels of testosterone by being exposed to UV radiation every day for 5 days. And then when they stopped that being exposed to the sun for 8 days, the levels actually went down and they went back to what they were. So interesting to see that there is some truth to that. Now, when you look in that study, they also looked at the genitals being exposed to the UV radiation. And then when they looked at the genitals after those same 5 days, they saw an increase of 200% of testosterone. Wow. So this is where this whole kind of new trend happened, like started. They were looking at this study that there was an increase of testosterone levels when you expose your genitals to the sun. And when we're talking exposing your genitals to the sun, we're not talking like hours on end, naked on your balcony or on the beach. We're talking enough to have a little bit of like redness, but not like being burned by the sun. Same thing for the chest. So men that are, let's say, outside, it would be maybe a good idea to do it without your shirt on, so that way you're getting the sun in and you're getting that a potentially higher level of testosterone in the bloodstream. Mm-hmm. So that was the first thing that I looked into when I was looking. So not a lot of studies were done afterwards. Mm-hmm. There have been studies that were done on animals and now using red light, because as you know, red light has been very, very popular now for all the healthy, the health benefits that it can bring. So there's one that's been happening with red light on animals, and seeing if that could also like increase the testosterone levels. So the answer was actually yes. There was an increase of 200% too on animals with the red light. But does that mean we can extrapolate that to human beings and be like go expose yourself to red light? Can't say that. But I think, the message and like we're laughing about this, it's kind of funny, but like should you be doing this or not? I think at the end of the day, it's like being outside, being in the sun is a good thing if you don't burn. The purpose is not to burn yourself outside, it's to have enough to get a tan out of it, but not reaching the level of being burnt. When we're talking about sunning your genitals, it could be a few minutes if you want to try it, if you're curious to try it, but just enough not to burn that area. And again, as you were speaking earlier, you don't want to be exposing yourself to too much heat either, because that could be a disadvantage. So for people that are trying it, good for you. We'll see if I don't know if we're going to be trying that anytime soon, but
I wouldn't I don't know if people associate sunscreen with sun and that you have to put sunscreen. I think the studies were made without sunscreen.
Oh yeah, 1939, no sunscreen. Yeah.
So there's also chemicals in sunscreen. We're not going to dive into this, but yeah, just to clarify.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. That's a very, very good point. So it's just a kind of funny thing. If you want to look it up on TikTok or Instagram, you'll see a lot of people are doing it. So there is some science behind it. It's old science. New data is out on the subject, not as much as we would want to. But I think as long as you're being, cautious and careful about not burning that area or not burning in general your skin, But a reminder that also that's not just the genitals. We're talking about also the chest being a good source of a good place to be able, to get the sun in and to get those testosterone levels up a little bit.
Up or balanced, let's put it that way.
Exactly, more balanced, bringing them back to
that's an extra thing you said, but there's a bunch that we discussed, and as you repeated also, to rebalance your hormone levels, and that is one of them. So please feel free to try different things to feel better. The goal is that you are feeling balanced and optimal and well. We hope we brought value to you. Did you want to add something?
I think it was a part one of the subject we wanted to speak about men's sex and masculine health.
Maybe we'll talk about women probably next time to bring back.
Oh, definitely. We can definitely speak about the woman's perspective. And I think there's a lot of things we want to share also about masculine health and masculinity and sex and mating and intimacy. And I would be happy to have that conversation in another podcast. But it was fun looking into all this data. But I hope we were able to bring value and more information on how to kind of, make our men be better, be more healthy. That's what we want for our men.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe, and we'll see you at the next podcast.